I was a research assistant for the OpenLIVES project, so I worked with the principal investigators, doing a lot of what you might call the donkey work, but sort of a lot of the necessary preparation to carry out the rather long period of field work that it obviously took to get all of these interviews. One of the things I did was obviously to contact a lot of these organisations and just find out whether they'd be happy for one of us to go along and chat to some of their members. Obviously there are ethical issues around whether people are willing to do this, what kinds of details they think we're after, and so on. But I just put it to them that we wanted to hear their stories, to listen to their experiences of being migrants and then coming back in particular. So there was a lot of contact with them prior to going out to France and Spain, and also mapping where these places were and where it was significant that there'd been a lot of emigration from particular areas of the country. Yeah, very willing, wonderfully willing in fact. I mean, and that was what became one of the great joys of the project, is that people were so keen to tell their story, and so there was a lot of really good participation, some interviews which were a lot longer than perhaps we expected to begin with, but I was really pleased all along with the way that the associations engaged with us. There's always the possibility that, you know, an external researcher, particularly from another country, coming in and saying, I want to talk to your people, there could have been some suspicion there, but actually we just found a very open reception, a really warm welcome into their offices and even the homes of the people that we then interviewed. Yeah, so where we were able to organise these through associations, the return migrant associations, of which there are scores across Spain, we were able to use their offices, and they were very kind in giving us a bit of space to do that. Where appropriate, we were then able to go into people's homes and talk to them there, which brought another level of interest and fascination into it. Just because there was then the potential to see evidence of their time abroad and what material culture, what belongings, what possessions, what pictures, ornaments, photos and so on they had to remind themselves of their experiences as Spanish emigres. And then one or two happened in hotel cafes and restaurants for the places I was staying. So that brought up a few challenges, because obviously none of these places are silent, they're not recording studios, and so in cafes we had people cluttering about with crockery and spoons and knives and forks and so on. In offices, some of them weren't soundproof. In other offices, such as Seville in the summer, there was no air conditioning, so we had to have the window open, otherwise we would have suffocated in there, but obviously there was traffic going on outside, so a variety of ideal and perhaps less ideal locations, but all of them in the end came up with some really good interviews and experiences. I mean, one particular challenge is obviously that although I'm fluent in Spanish, all of this work was done in a second language, and so again, while it's not necessarily a problem of comprehension, it does require that extra little bit of concentration the whole time. So the concentration level of any kind of OpenLIVES interview, when you're listening to people's life history, is going to take a lot of, you know, listening for detail and looking for things that you can then pick up on and ask a bit more about because they seem really interesting. When you're doing that in a second language, there's a little bit more of a challenge. So I would often find that I needed the great Spanish tradition of a siesta, just because a morning's work in sort of 35-40 degrees of really intently listening to some incredibly fascinating, but like I say, quite lengthy stories, took it out of you a bit. So there were practical issues like that. There were the linguistic issues, and then I've mentioned a number of the kind of issues around noise and location and so on already. It's going to sound really cliched, but having listened to people's stories who lived during a period, you know, the Civil War, some of them were children during the Civil War, then onto the Second World War, and then the great sort of Spanish Depression after that, and the Franco period, and then listening to how they had to move around just to be able to put food on the table for their families or send remittances home to keep their families there and their homes there, really made me think how actually we don't face many of those same very basic challenges today in 21st century Western Europe. I mean, it's simply, there are challenges, absolutely, but they're simply not of the level, of the magnitude that some of these people lived through. And so hearing how, you know, a number of them were involved not only in great economic migration from the mining areas of northern Asturias, and becoming political exiles because of the nationalists and the Republicans, and then with the fall of Barcelona having to go barefoot over the Pyrenees, and then being put into what were effectively concentration camps and all the kind of perils of those, and then forming part of the French resistance. I mean, you know, there were one or two who were really key people in some of the resistance to the Nazis, and then later on the resistance to Franco and some attempts to overthrow him, but certainly to return to democracy. So some fascinating stories that, to be honest, are the stuff of films. Some really sort of almost exciting life stories. And just hearing those and realising that, you know, it wasn't a film I was watching. It wasn't a grand narrative or a history lesson that I was sitting through. This was someone's life. This was someone's story who had seen these things and lived these experiences and you know, got involved in trying to change how the world was at that time. So it really gave me a sense of perspective on, you know, things I complain about day in, day out, and things that I think are tough. Some of these people had things really, really tough. And so, like I say, sounds cliched, but just gave a real sense of perspective. I think it's made me realise how important the human aspect of any research is. A lot of the other research I do is based around languages and language use and society and politics in Hispanic contexts. And so I do quite a lot of work on policy documents and texts and so on, but all of those can only tell us a certain amount of what people are doing and saying and living on the ground every day. So really to put myself in a position where I had these people in front of me and they were willing to tell their stories really brought home to me how essential it is that within humanities we listen to humans, human stories, human experiences, human lives, and what they have gone through, what they are going through, what they are doing every day, in order to inform our research and how we then reflect that part of history or that part of social practice and what recommendations we then make in the future. The human aspect is absolutely essential.